Hello there. Welcome back to the channel. As always, I hope you like, I hope you subscribe, push the subscribe button. This way you could stay tuned in all my videos. This video is about sexual offenders in prison, which I was not, but we are going to talk about the ones that were in there. People are always, think that people with a sexual crime in prison get killed or beat up right away. In a lot of instances, that is true. And I will explain. When you go to what I mean by a sexual offender, of course, is someone who committed a rape, someone who committed a child molestation, someone who slept with a minor, maybe, different scenarios that make people a sex offender. So when you come into the prison, the maximum security prison system, see, there's a difference between the medium security prison system and the maximum security prison system, right? And so, unfortunately, a lot of sex offenders don't get heavy amounts of prison time to do. Some of them do, and they end up in the max system. There are many more sexual offenders in the medium security prison because the judges give these people sentences of 1 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years, 3 to 6 years, and they end up in a medium security prison. But there are sex offenders who commit serious rapes or rape and murder, rape and robbery, and they end up in the maximum security system. So in the maximum security system, if someone has a sexual charge, first I should say that the prison population will find out about the charge. Everybody finds out what everybody is in prison for. So if a guy comes into prison and he stays to himself and doesn't talk to anyone and doesn't hang out with people, eventually someone's going to find out what the guy's charge is. When a guy came into Sing Sing or Attica prison, it was basically announced by the officers what their charge was. They would be moving into the prison area, coming down the company, and the officer would scream out loud, "Rapist coming in, rapist moving in, child molester moving into 12 cell," and so the population would know right away what this guy was in prison for. But if the prisoner comes in and he has a sexual charge, right? So prison operates different. Let me explain it like this. In Attica, right? If you're as I said, prison is segregated. So if a guy came out to hang out with the white guys, if he was a white guy and he came out to hang out with the white guys need to see his paperwork before he comes and hangs out with us. We need to see his indictment papers. We need to see his conviction papers, and in order for him to spend time with us, we want to see if he's a rat, if he's a snitch, if he's a rapist, if he's a child molester. And if he is one of those things, then he's not allowed anywhere near us. A lot of times we won't even, beat him up or do anything to him right there. We just tell him, get the hell away from us. You're not allowed near us. And, we keep him away from us. And that's what's called being mudded out. He gets treated like a mutt, like a mongrel. And so now if he comes to the prison yard and he's a white guy, he's not allowed near the white guys. All the other groups are going to see that. They're going to see that he's walking the yard by himself. And the wolves will come out, what they call the wolves. And they may come over to, "Hey, Fish, why is that white guy not with you guys?" And we tell him, he's a rapist. He's a child molester. And then those wolves from the other groups will go do what they want to do. And usually that's try and extort him, for whatever he has. I've seen men extorted for tens of thousands of dollars. I've seen the wolves get on the phone with the sexual predator's family and say, "If you don't send us this amount of money, this guy's going to get killed." I've witnessed that. So usually they try and extort him and take him for everything they have. This way when they make him go to commissary, he has to turn his commissary over. He has to order packages for the other prisoners. He holds drugs for them. They make him a mule. They abuse this sexual offender altogether. You know what I mean? So that's it. That's in the maximum security prison. This is what happens to them. And then usually as well, they get hurt really, really bad. So I have to say that in my time when I was in prison, remember, I was a lot younger and I wasn't disciplined like I was now. I had a different thought process than I had now, but I have literally attacked dozens and dozens of sexual offenders. So some people will say, why do you have a right to do that? You committed a crime and they committed a crime. Well, there's something called prison justice, and prisoners don't like sexual offenders. Even if prisoners are criminals themselves, if they're murderers or robbers themselves, they don't like people who rape women, and they don't like people who hurt children. And that's where it crosses the line, even in prison, and prison justice is enforced. And as I said, I attacked dozens and dozens of sexual offenders and put them in the hospital. I was 24, 25, 30 years old. I was young, and I used to consider it fun attacking them. And we would beat them up so badly that they couldn't live in the general population. A lot of times other guys would stab them, would get them out of there right away. And if a crime was so bad, if it was a media case and guys were well aware of the media case that this guy raped and murdered a kid or something, he can get murdered in there. So that's what happens to the sex offenders in the maximum security prison. I could give you a lot of stories, personal stories of situations where I attacked them and hurt them very badly. Then you have the medium security prison. So now there's medium security prisons where tons and tons of sexual offenders are in the medium security prison because, as I said in the beginning of the video, they get sentenced to a smaller amount of time. And instead of going to the maximum security, they end up in the medium security. So I ended up in a prison called Mid-State Correctional Facility, which is in Marcy, New York, right across the street from Marcy Correctional Facility, where they recently killed the prisoner Robert Brooks. And in Mid-State Correctional Facility, it's one of the correctional facilities that has a program that sexual offenders must attend in order to get released. So there's a large percentage of sexual offenders in this facility. And when you enter a facility like that, you can't just beat up every single sexual offender that's there. I mean, it's making up 60, 70% of the population. I was disgusted to be in that facility, but there was 30% of us that didn't have a sexual crime, but they mix you into that facility anyway. You know what I mean? The whole prison isn't sexual offenders, but a large number is. And so, they just live in there. You know what I mean? What was crazy is they weren't allowed to get any magazines with children in it through the package room. They weren't allowed to have any photographs of children. They weren't allowed to have, they had these not crazy rules, but they had different rules for these people who had committed sexual crimes. So those sexual offenders live in the medium security prisons without getting attacked, as much, and sometimes not at all, but, and there's a lot of medium security facilities like that. Going back to the maximum security prison system for a minute, I have to say that when I said the white guys would check the paperwork to see if the white prisoner had a sexual crime, most of the other groups didn't do that, unfortunately. They welcomed everyone and they just hung out with anyone, which we saw as disgraceful. You know what I mean? These groups were willing to accept anyone inside of their groups. It didn't matter to them. You know what I mean? But it mattered to us. I'm sure there were some other groups that didn't allow a rapist or a child molester to be with them, but I can't even remember other groups really even checking the paperwork of other prisoners to see what they were in prison for. It just seemed like they didn't have those type of morals or that type of value system, and they were willing to accept anyone inside of their groups, for the most part. And I'm sure there were some exceptions to the rule, but we didn't allow anyone with those charges near us. We didn't want any part of it, So that's really what happens with the sexual offenders. A lot of them end up signing into PC, which is protective custody, because they feel they can't live in the normal prison population. Some of them get put in IPC, which is involuntary protective custody, where the facility, the administration says, we better protect this guy because if we put him out there in the population, he's going to get done. Many, many years ago, when I was doing my time, you could F up these sexual offenders and nothing would really happen to you because the officers don't like a sexual offender as well. Who likes someone who rapes a woman? Who likes someone who abuses a child? And so the officers didn't like them either. So they would say to me, Fish, There's, you could go do anything you want to that guy. Just don't kill him because it's too much paperwork. That's exactly what they used to say to me. And I'd go in the cell and smash their face off of the bars, knock their teeth out. I specifically remember times where I was jumping on a child molester's head. I mean, and he was taken out in a stretcher full of blood to the hospital. So they would let you do whatever you wanted to them. But in these days, the laws have changed. There are harsher penalties, and a lot of these sexual offenders are protected even inside of the prison system. And so if you're a prisoner that wants to go beat one of them up, they may charge you with assault. They may charge you with attempted murder. They give you another 10 or 15 years on your sentence. They put you in solitary confinement for a year or two. And so they're kind of protected these days to the point where, you really can't do much to them. But there are exceptions to the rule. There are officers that will turn a blind eye, that will turn their back and say they didn't see anything. So I guess it all depends on where you are, and it depends on the situation. But sexual offenders do not have a good time in prison. They walk through prison every day petrified that someone's going to find out. And unlike the old days, though, they do get to survive a bit more, a lot more than they did during my time. So that's a little lesson about what happens to guys in the prison system when they're sexual offenders.